for joining me, Sam Sutton, today at Diverse Relations. It's an absolute privilege to speak with someone whose leadership has reshaped the legal profession. And you're an inspiration to so many, not just the BAME community, outside the BAME community, but especially with Black women as well, who want to navigate this legal space. So just to introduce you, Stephanie Boyce, a solicitor. This is quite a bit of a shopping list, so I'm going to have to look at my notes for this. It's just so amazing. You were Deputy Vice President of the Law Society of England and Wales in 2019, making history as the first Black person to hold this position. And then in 2021, you became the President of the Law Society of England and Wales, becoming the first Black person to hold this position again. And just to add, you are a fellow with the Chartered Governance Institute, and in 2022 you received honorary doctorates of law from Keele University and the University of East London, as well as a distinguished Alumna of the Year award from King's College London. Again, in that year, you also received the High Sheriff of Buckinghamshire for your leadership of the legal profession during the COVID-19 pandemic, and for services to equality, diversity and inclusion. You also received a Lifetime Achievement Award in 2023 for your services to the legal profession. What a prestigious and absolutely high list of achievements. Totally amazing, Stephanie. Totally amazing.
You left a few out, but we could be here for a while. But absolutely, it is an honour to be recognised by my peers and others for the work that I did. But also, it wasn't just about me, and I didn't do this alone. It is, these awards belong to all of us who have faced barriers seen and unseen, systemic, entrenched ones, and we've had to navigate our way around those, and we're still having to navigate our way around those.
So, okay, then, if we can begin by exploring your journey, so your background and your early influence. So, take me back to your upbringing and your environment, Stephanie.
Well, absolutely. So my story starts in about 1960 when my grandfather traversed the waters to come from the Caribbean, the sunny Isles of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, to come to England in search of, I say, they say, faith, hope and greater opportunities. And he was followed in 1962 by my nan, who would later become his wife. And the children then came and started to follow. But there were gaps of a couple of years and 5 years before my mother and her twin sister and younger sibling would come in 1967 to this country. And as I say, in search of upward mobility. And so my grandfather instilled inside of us, and indeed my whole family, they instilled inside of us a desire to do better. And how could I not want to honour that legacy by making something of myself? They came at a time, my grandfather spoke lots about the cold weather, about snow on the ground. My mother spoke about when they got to, when the plane touched down and they were getting off the plane and how cold it was, and they'd never known cold like this. And some of the things that they had to go through, and others, in order that I can sit where I am sitting today. And that is something that has permeated my life through to my education. My grandfather did not read or write for a number of reasons, including because we were so poor that he was ashamed to go to school because he was barefooted, holes in his clothes and so forth. But he instilled a sense of dignity inside of us that we were to make something of ourselves. He didn't tell us what, but we were to make something of ourselves. So growing up, as I did on a council estate in a single parent household, that desire to do something with my life. And I used to look at, because at that time in the mid 70s, late 70s, you didn't see much people of colour, many people of colour on television. And certainly growing up in rural Buckinghamshire, you really did not see many people of colour. And so I look to those, and I know very controversially Margaret Thatcher, and I don't condone anything she went on to do. However, at that time, she was our education minister. She was a barrister. I had wanted to become a barrister to start with. She became our first female prime minister. And all of those things for a child, and I used to do a really good impression of her, but all of those things as a child, a 7-year-old, dreaming big, dreaming of the woman I would become, she was a role model. I didn't see others around me who looked like her or who achieved what she had achieved. And if you look back what she achieved, and if you look at the pictures, the only woman amongst all of those men at a time was a remarkable achievement. But as I say, unfortunately, some of her policies and some of her behaviours and beliefs went beyond the realm of humanity. But, to take the good out of what there was, that is what I wanted to become, was a barrister. I can't say I want to become Prime Minister, but who knows?
I think it's quite possible, Stephanie.
Well, one of the things I talk lots about, because people are, and in fact, somebody asked me yesterday, why are you not in politics? Others ask, why do you not have a political appointment? Well, that's an answer that I would love to know as well. But the way our political party system is set up means that actually people like myself, unlike the Donald Trumps of the world in America that actually have never held political office, that you can become president of the United States. That's not the way our political party system works in this country. And I do think that it is, I think it holds good people, or it prevents good people from going into politics, because you have to start from the grassroots and work your way up. And I think some people who, like myself, started later in life, didn't actually know, and I'm apolitical, but the point is that, we need talent in our party political system, and our current setup is keeping talent out.
Sparked your interest in law then?
I think it was Margaret Thatcher, some of it, but not only that, it was, if I take you back to a time in, as I said, mid-70s, late 70s. So, and I remember our home being a hub on Sundays, that you'd cook enough, my mother would cook enough, our family would cook enough, that if anybody came, not a community centre, but a community hub, that if anybody came and knocked on the door, there was enough to feed them with. And those stories, so I grew up in a time where children should be seen but not heard, but I had big ears. And so I would listen to the stories of the policies that were coming down, some of the offensive legislation that is now, the legacy of the Windrush scandal.
Yes.
And other, and other scandals, but where people were being encouraged, and we see this today, people being encouraged and paid to leave these shores, people afraid of leaving, so we never went on holiday. And whilst my parents were documented, the fear that you might step out of Britain to never step back in, that permeated every part of your life. So listening to the stories that was going on around me, seeing the injustices that was unfolding, you had the miners' strike, the blackouts that would be the electric blackouts, because as the miners were on strike and coal that was fueling the electric and so forth wasn't being cultivated, and the impact of that. And I think what I wanted to do was, I had a burning desire to ensure that people's voices were heard, and that people could access justice. And that was as a 7-year-old, as early as I can remember. But, I'm 53 now.
Let me just see what else. Just make sure this is recording properly. Yeah. You were talking about that they were scared to leave the shores of scared to go back to the Caribbean.
As some members of my family were, told to prove that they had a right to live here. But ultimately, my family was some of the lucky ones. People who we hear today have been locked out of Britain for 25, 50 years. People who were denied entry back into this country, who, when they were in this country, having not left, denied housing, lost their jobs, the scandal of the Windrush, the legacy of the Windrush that is intergenerational, that has affected generations, 5 different generations at least. And of course, we have a Windrush Commissioner now, but of course, the legacy of that continues. People are still not being heard. And so that was the driver. I wanted to ensure that people's voices were heard, that they have had access to justice. And at a time in 2025, when not only in the United Kingdom, but globally, where governments are deprioritizing funding to the justice system, the scandals, not only of the Windrush, but of the post office, of the infected blood scandal, and the list goes on, right? If we don't have access to justice, we are attacking the very democratic institution that keeps us safe, that keeps our society fair. And we must, as a nation, I believe, we must encourage the government. We must pressure the government to properly fund our whole ecosystem that is the justice system, prisons, the police force, and so forth.
What barriers were challenges for you?
Well, let me talk about the barriers that I still face.
Okay.
So, having achieved, as you said in the introduction, making legal history, having reached the highest rungs of a very conservative, male-dominated profession.
Yes.
I often think, and of course, you read out a list of my achievements and having been attributed as changing the way we think and view leaders and leadership. I'm often bemused, because others are bemused, as to why I sit here with no position or title. And part of me wonders, if I was of a certain demographic, and I'm speaking very frankly, but honestly, if I was of a certain demographic, coming from a certain background, being educated in a certain way, how is it that I still sit here with having achieved what I achieved with the legal profession, leading that profession at some of the most turbulent times in our nation's history, through lots of things, pandemic, war in Ukraine and so forth, and the death of Her Majesty the Queen. How do I sit here with no position or title yet? I assume it's coming, but I don't. I've had recruiters tell me I can't get onto a blue chip company because you don't have that experience. I've led a multi-million-pound organization with over 400 and something staff, but I don't have the right experience to sit on a blue chip company. So for me, it's the way we look at who we put in positions of power and influence, what they look like, what they sound like, who they should be. And far too many of us are still locked out, whether we are, whether we're Black, whether we're Asian, whatever our ethnic minority is, whatever our diverse characteristic is, whatever our social background is, disability, sexuality, religion, whatever. Far too many of us in 21st century Britain remains locked out of opportunities. Equality of opportunity is not spread evenly. And that's why I continue to advocate and campaign for equality of opportunity, but not enough just to give us, equality of opportunity. It has to be evenly spread, and it must be accessible and fair.
People of colour, why are they not in leadership roles of DEI? Why is it people of who our slogan here at Diverse Relation is walking the path is different to knowing the path. You walk the path, you feel it, you're part of it. Why is it not the people that are actually DEI that are barriered from leading their own cause?
I think the answer is probably in the acronym DEI. It's diversity, equality, and inclusion. I switch them around, equality, because I believe that if you have equality, the diversity and the inclusion will come. But, it's not. So if you think about under the Equality Act, 2010, if you think about the definition of, the characteristics that are protected, the protected characteristics. So no doubt, lots of the hirers will say that, that they've got the lived experience because they might fit into one of those characteristics. I took the decision to focus on social mobility when I was in office, and continue to focus on social mobility, because in my mind, if you're poor, you're poor. It doesn't matter what your race, your gender, sexuality, age, whatever. If you do not have money in this country, if you do not come from a certain background, as we spoke about before, you are held back. You do not have the same advantages as those who come from a different demographic background whatsoever. So people often talk about merit, that actually the hirers in these positions are those who on merit have been appointed on merit. I have no problem with merit. The problem I have with merit is when it is not being applied equally or fairly. And that is the problem with merit, and potentially at times feeds into some of these positions. But quite frankly, I don't care who's in these positions as long as the work is being done. And the problem that we're seeing at the moment with America sneezing and Britain catching a cold, I was at an event last evening where somebody was like, look, you know, the rollback, firms are scared, they're not engaging in DEI. I know that because, you know, some of my work has dropped off. They're just not engaging. It bothers me, absolutely bothers me, that what we have seen happening, people scared by policies and autocratic ideologies that has seeped into the core of this country. And I know there are some companies, corporates out there who have put up a stand and have fought back. The trouble is some of the conversation around DEI has become fractured. It's become, what about me? It's become divisive. It's become exclusive rather than inclusive. And we have to find a way back from that. You know, we cannot be led by division. We want leaders, politicians who are going to unite us, not divide us. We want rhetoric, you know, the populism of rhetoric that gets people exercised over things that they do not properly understand. We don't need that. We don't want that. We don't want continued unbroken promises, people becoming poorer rather than becoming, you know, richer, feeling safer in their homes and secure in their neighborhoods and so forth. So I think it's a complex answer to the question that you posed.
So on the back of that then, in terms of social mobility, I think in terms of organisations, institutions better supporting social mobility for underrepresented groups, what do you think that they need to do?
What do they think? I think collaboration has always been a big one for me. Okay. I see lots and lots, because this is the other issue. There are lots and lots and lots of groups and organizations and founders and so forth and so forth. Yeah. And I always spoke about this. Wouldn't it be some of the best work we've done has been when we collaborate? How powerful and how loud will our voices be when we collaborate together, rather than, because we all seem to be fishing at times from the same pond, diluting the stock, you know, where budgets, you know, we're all asking for the same, from the same budget, from the same funds and so forth. But collectively, what is it that we are all trying to eradicate? And most of that is prejudice, it's discrimination. As I say, we want equality of opportunity, to be treated fairly, to have access to opportunities. You know, I had someone say to me the other day, and it bothers me that people still think like this, but somebody who I consider to be a good friend, who said to me that when she sees me and others like me, she sees my colour first. I could not get my, absolutely, I couldn't get my, but she was adamant, but I couldn't get my head around that, because I said, but I do not, when I look at you, I do not see your colour first. I see you first, right? But, you know, this is what we're up against, that individuals like that who should know better, who is educated and so forth, is falling into that populism, that rhetoric, and is quite comfortable in espousing that back.
Have we actually made progress then?
We made progress. We made progress. You know, when I was living in America, when I first went to America, yeah. And, you know, that song that Tracy Chapman sang, Across the Lines, I didn't know what she really meant when she said the train line tracks that separates whites from blacks. So when she talked about the tracks that separated whites from blacks, I didn't actually know what she meant, because when I was growing up in Britain in, as I say, mid to late 70s, early 80s, and when I went to America, I was proud of the multiculturalism that was Britain. As I sit here today, I'm embarrassed. I'm ashamed of what we have become. That individuals are being openly attacked because of their religion, because of their ethnicity, because of their gender, because of their sexuality, their disability, their age, you name it. I'm absolutely ashamed of our country, but I haven't given up hope. I have not given up hope that we can come back from this. But to come back from this, we must understand and share those common values and principles as to who we are as a nation, who we are as a society, who we are to become. And if we can't find the commonality in that, then I worry for us. And to be clear, some of this is not just germane to the United Kingdom. There are other countries going through similar, if not worse, as to the issues that we face. But that doesn't make it right, and it doesn't exclude our responsibility individually and collectively to do better.
I had a meeting a couple of months ago with one of the Inns of Courts, and I was speaking, I'm not going to name which inn it was, but it was court, and I was asking about the diversity and inclusion, in particular for Black people, because that's my lane. Yeah, that's what I know. I am Black. That's what I know, and I talk about what I know. And I think there was a feeling that I may have been attacking them, which I wasn't. I was just trying to find out information, what policies they had in place and how they were doing things, and if we could collaborate. But I was faced with a response stating that what we think microaggressions are, because they didn't mean those things, they were just harmless comments. And then I was told that they had a 35% intake of people of colour, and that was enough. Which I felt was very capped then. If you're saying that you've got 35% people in your institution and that's enough. Me personally, as a person of colour, I don't think that's enough. I think we need to keep going and keep going. Would there be an issue if there was 100% or 90%? Is there an issue if people of colour were 90% or 100%? I mean, that's the life that we have been in all the time. We are the minority. So why would it be a problem if the pendulum swung to the other side, so to speak? I mean, just what are your thoughts on that?
I, Stephanie Boyce, has been interviewed by Sam Sutton at Diverse Relations.